Today I'm going to be doing an original content video for the first time with a special guest, James Diboe, who is the host of the Discovering podcast, which you can find on YouTube on his channel. Historian, traveller, who's been around Africa, many countries around the world to visit indigenous peoples, and brought him in today to specifically talk about the Bantu people, to find out the origins and what we can about them, and possible links to Egypt as well. So with all that said, James, welcome to the show.
How you doing, my brother?
Yeah, it's good to have you on, man. Finally, we've chatted about this before. We've been trying to get this conversation going for a while now, specifically about the Bantu people. Obviously, we're talking about maybe coming up to 500 million people, possibly by some estimations, 600-700 languages all over Africa. So, I'm guessing you've encountered them on your travels at some point. So, start from the beginning. Where did he come from?
Okay, according to a lot of the anthropologists and certain linguistics, they say Eastern Nigeria. But then you'll get people say Cameroon. Now that's right next door. So Nigeria and Cameroon would have shared pretty much the same place at one time. Like, we don't think in terms of countries. That's a European thing, you see, because when we think in terms of countries, but the Bantu migration, supposedly they started in Eastern Nigeria. Now, remember, there's other oral history, because some Bantus will tell you that they've always been there. Some Bantus will tell you they came from Kemet. Some Bantus will tell you that they just base it on Niger and Congo, basically.
Yeah.
Then there's somewhere, the Swahili coast, well, what they call Swahili, which is a Bantu language, but according to some people, it's mixed with Arabic, but some historians don't subscribe to that. They believe it's a pure Bantu language. But I'm more concentrating on people who actually speak different African languages, and I'm going to give them more credit. I have to give them more credit, and that's always the way of traveling anyway, where you're meeting indigenous African groups. Like Kenya, I met Bantu people and Maasai people, Maasai and Nilo-Saharan. So the differences between them, the insight when I was going to Kenya, I wasn't actually thinking of Bantus and Nilo-Saharan, and I was just thinking of Kenyans or Kenyans, because I was thinking in terms of a country at the time. Also, the athletics, for example, long distance runners come from East Africa.
Yes.
Sprinters come from West Africa. Now, when we say that's usually the Nilo-Saharan who has that kind of genetics, they have different genetics. But Bantu people, also, some of them would have adapted, I'm sure, like in the last 2,000 to 3,000 or even 4,000 years. And then we can't forget about the Sahara Desert. This is one of the things that gets so overlooked. And I think more deeper research needs to be going into this also. You've got to...
it's not really... There's a lot there to be learned, isn't it?
It is. Sahara. I'm not too happy with what's just there, what's presented. I think that you need more effort into it. But there's a lot of evidence of, like, when there was no desert, basically. And then they say the deserts only came the last, some say 8,000 years. Some say 11,000 years. And then some will see it as like, okay, it started, but it didn't end, so it's... But you can imagine the time when there was a lot of lakes, rivers, a lot of vegetation. I can see why there would be a connection with sub-Saharan Africa, what they call it, and North Africa. And at the same time, we've listened to different people ourselves, even some people you've sent me. I forgot the brother's name. I'm subscribed to this channel. The brother who said there was 90% of Africans living in North Africa before they migrated. Now, I don't just write things off. I'm not just that just sounds ridiculous. But we got to really think about these things. When people migrate, it's one thing, people follow people, but people follow animals as well. And if you imagine yourself like, see, we look at if you just took that desert out of Africa, yeah, took it out, it just got, you wouldn't look at it, you just look like, it's like looking at North America and go from North America down to South America. I know they've got deserts, but you can still get down there, you know. So you'd have to look at it as like, it's like this desert made a big divide. So imagine people who share the same linguistics. Now, I've got to bring up Clyde Winters with this because I think this is probably one of our strongest academic scholars from the West, United States, that can speak on these things because he is qualified as a linguistic anthropologist. And he's actually a mentor of Ranok Rashidi, who is my mentor as well. So definitely he's a person. He mentions anyway about the C group people, the C group. He says that they were in the middle of what we call the Sahara when it was lush. Then when it started drying up, he reckons about 3,500 BC, he started to migrate now. He explains about them migrating into Kemet, Egypt, Sudan, and moving out of Africa also into Sumer, Iraq, if anyone doesn't know where that is. Also, the Elamites of Persia, they became them, and the Dravidians of India. Then there would also be a migration of obviously the Africans in China and other places. Like there's definitely this Bantu connection with Japan, you know, these linguistics, and then them linguistics going to the South Pacific and many places. So the Bantu group, I don't really think enough work has actually been put into it, because I like to see the Bantu migration. Where are we in the world? I don't just mean from being taken into slavery by the Arabs or the Europeans. I'm talking about moving as free people from ancient times. Yeah. So when I think about some of these people out in Fiji Island, yeah, you look at how they look, yeah, like the phenotype, the afros, and they more look similar and share similar linguistics to West Africans down they would with East Africans. And that's quite interesting because West Africa's up totally the other side, and then East Africa's over there. So the name names like Tonga, you'll see that in around Zambia, Zimbabwe areas, you know, and then most people share the same linguistics anyway. And spirituality, you know, they all share a common spirituality, even though I remember speaking to Tata, he mentioned about the 3 stones. That's usually symbolic to the Bantu 3 stones in a certain shape. And that was definitely, obviously, a brother. I actually learned a lot more as well about the Bantu, as far as more into, I mean, you see, I'm not really with all that. Like, you could go country. If everyone's the same blood and you tell me that there's 300 tribes or say 300 linguistics, and you know, that I tried to sum them into one, and I tried to bring them closer, but I have to go further back into time, you know, to bring them closer. It's like these people who speak click, for example, they might have different dialects amongst their cliques. One's in Namibia, one's in South Africa, you know. So I don't really play into the linguistics because it's, you could almost look at just England alone, where different Black people are in England. Look at London slang, Liverpool slang, Leeds slang, and we're all speaking the same language. Do you know what I mean?
Well, with the Bantu languages, it's, some people say you could look at it as one language with many dialects instead of looking at it as many languages. So that's probably because of the similarities that run through. You know what I mean?
I always think things get more complicated though when you're looking at these big differences. Because when you look at what's similar, you get like more of a clearer picture. There's no complications. And listen to their stories anyway. Another thing, what I was aware of from Dr. Ben and people like that, the Egyptian creation story of coming from the bottom of the Nile, you know, considering you could call it the Great Lakes region. Some believe it's Central Africa, So Congo would be considered Central Africa. And Congo is considered the heart of Africa, by the way.
And
That's
that's where your recent interview with Tao
yeah,
Haramanube, he
yeah,
put the origin in Congo, didn't he? Around Central Africa region, is that right?
yeah. Now, I've always like questioned these things many times when me and you've talked for a while about origin of where Africa, where our first place where we started, and I've
That's
always
right.
questioned that. I mean, I've looked at Nigeria because there's people believe that like it was the Garden of Eden, and then people spoke about Congo, and then some people match it up with the Hebrew Israelite story. They want to do that,
That's
and
right, yeah.
so.
Yeah.
But I think each one of them all has something, a bit of a fact to it. Wherever
Yeah.
you go, wherever you go, because a story has to come from something, doesn't it? Anyway, so for someone to write a Bible or Quran, or it has to come from something, and
Exactly. It's
a
like
lot
this
of
Igbo story, the Igbo, like you said, Igbo is
yeah,
supposedly having a link with Israel. People are split on that, you know what I mean? People
yeah,
believe it, some people don't.
and I think what it is if the story was true about 90%, well, maybe that's a high number, could be 80%, but living in North Africa, then the time they came down to what they call sub-Saharan Africa, they would have been in Israel as well as Egypt. Well, North Africa, they would have been in Israel, and that is
Yeah.
actually considered as Africa, Northeast Africa. I mean, Saudi Arabia, Northeast Africa. So and then the Indian Ocean. There's no Indian Ocean. That used to be called the Ethiopian Ocean. But a lot of these words I'm
Did.
using anyway, they're all foreign words to Africa. Ethiopia, Libya,
Yeah, Greek. Yeah.
Greek, Nigeria. So the closest thing we get is the word Naga in Ethiopia. You know,
Mm.
but speaking of Ethiopia, what about Bantus in Ethiopia? Let's make it a bit more. See, I mean, I like I say, when I look at sub-Saharan, it's very easy to identify the Bantu.
So, do you think the Bantu, you said before the Bantu came from the west and have come all the way across to the east? Is that the direction the migration was?
This
So
is
they'll have ended up
basically,
in Kenya later on and
yeah,
places like that later on.
but you've got to also match up the proto-Bantu. So
Mm.
you've got to look at like, you can't just look at like, well, this is more a Europeanized way how he's described Eastern Nigeria. Sometimes he might say Cameroon, but where did they come from? Why is their linguistics tied to Niger Congo, a related family group of languages?
Yeah,
Mandi, what they spoke in
that's right.
Gambia, um, other places. So I just believe that the Bantu, they're at least like 80%, 75% of Africa. They're in South Somalia. They're in, they will be in parts. And also, remember, there was also Bantus taken into slavery as well.
That's right. Yeah.
So you
Some of
see,
the Bantus in Somalia you just talked about there,
yeah, some
sent
came
into
as free
slavery.
people, but there was supposed to be
That's right.
three waves. First one is free people. Then the second and the third would have been taken into slavery by Europeans, that was. But it's just divided up like that, though. And then you got to remember Madagascar is another place. Now, why I like Madagascar, speaking of Bantu, is because it shows you that we were able to navigate to get to there. That's why it's
Yeah.
very interesting. Even though they throw the little stories in, did other groups, Asian groups, take them into slavery and from East Africa, and there's no evidence of that. So we can't go with that. There's evidence of them being taken into Arabia, India, China, but there's no evidence of East Africans getting taken into Madagascar by Asians. There's nothing
No,
there.
they'll have sailed across on their own, same way
Yeah,
the
because
Asians did, you know, and
yeah, because
colonized it later.
what they're trying to do is just take wild guesses, and I don't think that's irresponsible for
But it's a long
science.
time ago, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah, and what you look at is you've got to look at the common sense. in order to make a migration like that and be 75% or 80% of the continent and the geographical area that you've covered, that is a massive expansion. So it would be foolish to think that they couldn't have done more than that. Like basically the same group of linguistics peoples who moved into other parts and became done the Chinese dynasty and Indus Valley, Sumer. So these same groups were the ones in North Africa who migrated to well, the middle of Africa. I wouldn't actually, you can't call that north, it's just the middle of Africa. It's not north or south, is it? Yeah, so the Bantu is very important to know. And even if you look at the side of it of slavery, which I don't really like to go too much into, but why were they targeted the most to be taken into, not just by Europeans, but taken into Arabia, China, Japan, and India, so there's too much, even though this is the large population, but obviously it's easier to conquer and divide people when there's different groups. It only takes one group to come in, Asiatics or Greeks, Romans, Arabs, Turks, any of them. They ain't coming in for any good welcome.
So what do you think? What do you think about this theory? When they've ultimately went south, apparently they've encountered Khoisan people and possibly pygmies as well. Like, have they mixed together or were they pushed to the side? Do you think they actually did encounter them when the Bantu were coming south?
Yeah, because the pygmies mixed with actually some Bantus on the way. And I think a lot of these mixtures is part of survival and part of representing like one brotherhood as well, whether you're pygmy or you're Bantu or Khoisan. Khoisan, interesting one. The Khoisan, they have a different style how they hunt.
Oh, you met a couple of Khoisan people in South Africa, didn't you, on your last visit over there?
Yeah, and actually
and
also
they
in
were hunters,
Namibia,
so
in
yeah, that's
Namibia
right,
as well.
that's right.
Yeah,
And traditionally, these guys were hunters, is that right? Not farmers. So when the Bantu come down, they'll both farming.
That's right.
Yeah,
they would have really benefited each other,
yeah.
and that is the
I
form
lived
of
together for
unity.
long.
It's not one group coming to be lazy and the other group, I know that's how other groups see things. This is the slave master and this is the slave. No, not at all, because the Khoisan have a lot of great skills too. Their style of hunting, when they have that bow and arrow, they're just perfect with the shot. They know where to aim. They could have showed to survive on their land. They're going to be the masters of it. So, and I think that is wherever it's like the Nilo-Saharan cattle herders. They're just like fit perfectly with that. Around the goats, and I've seen a lot of them in Tanzania, Zanzibar, and I'm meeting Bantu. And also the difference is when I see them, okay, they might look a little different, but at the same time, we're all one people. But as using the term Bantu, we're just more closely related. So all the people in the United States, Bantu, the ones who've taken into slavery into Brazil, Bantu. And when it comes to the spirituality in Haiti, and even in Trinidad, funny enough, Trinidad has they have that, what is it? It's like it's mixed with Christianity. It's like Vodun, but it's mixed with Christianity.
Oh yeah, blending the native stuff with the new.
Yeah, and also actually some of the Tianos, actually some of their.
Oh yeah, the Caribbean, yeah.
Yeah, right. So you do get mixtures of them, which is interesting. Do you know what I mean? Definitely. But I think we need definitely more researches. There's a lot of different things I've read about Bantu people, and they all believe in the supreme being, what they seem to come up with. But I'd say a whole of Africa sees a supreme being, like Tata said the other day.
That's right.
The question when I addressed him about God. Now, I always find depending on how you ask a question to someone is the answer sometimes you're going to get. Sometimes when you say what is God. Sometimes people can think stuff like you're referring to these doctrine religions that are out there, these popular religions, where I'm not even coming on that. I'm just coming on the tip as when you tell me it's a great spirit, that's good enough for me. That's good enough for me.
In some Bantu cultures, apparently there's a belief that the universe is infinite in the past, yeah.
Yeah.
So apparently there's no creation stories.
No beginning and no ending.
That's right, yeah.
Yeah. And you see, here's what I find is depending on, like I say before, it depends how you ask the question about God. Sometimes it's the answer you get back, sometimes the other way. So I will look at that one as how I could put it is the leave me change of thought. What was the question again? Sorry, again.
It's some of the Bantu having a spiritual concept of eternal universe, no
Yeah,
beginning, no end.
yeah. So two forms: the physical and the spiritual side of it.
That's right.
Yeah, and we can separate them or we can connect them together, but I think it's good to concentrate on them separate a bit because
So maybe what they're saying is there was a material creation, but spiritual existence is
if
infinite
you
in the
look at it
past.
as I'd look at it as energy, and
Yeah,
I think it's easier for everyone to understand when we say energy. So
yeah.
energy is always here, it's always been here, in the same way as we're considered to always as being here, whether or not we were in the other dimension. Then there's some creation stories have come up from the stars, but so I think that there's each story, like I said, represents something. Some might have that more truth than others. So when we say stars, we refer to stardust. So I don't like I say, if you take every word literally, and not even just in religion, I think even also in ancient Kemet or even some African spirituality. So if you want to go along with the mermaids and the water, and that's up to yourself. But I try to just like look at that as a metaphor.
Yeah, you
So
got to be careful on how you interpret stuff and imposing these new ideas on ancient literature. Sometimes it doesn't work, does it? Because you don't
yeah,
understand how the structured language.
yeah.
It's difficult to do that. Definitely.
I think with it not having a
Yeah,
book
no.
as well, with it not having a book, African spirituality, it makes it easier because when you've got a book, you're always looking at it's always there. So you're looking at like, well, the mermaid come out of the water, and that's it's going to represent something. But some people might take that literally and think that is an actual mermaid and stuff.
Yeah, it's there to um, tell a story. Maybe a moral story. You see a lot of that in the Bible, don't you? Where you think to yourself, that story might not necessarily be true, but at least it's teaching a lesson. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
yeah.
Making some kind of points. There was one question I was going to ask you with regard to Clyde Winters. I think Clyde Winters mentioned this. He says there's a link between Egypt and the Bantu people, right? And the two things he pointed to, or the two main examples he gave in this video also, were linguistics. There's some words in Bantu languages that are lining up with the ancient Egyptian Coptic, and also there were some images where you look at the clothes that they're wearing in ancient Kemet, right? And you look at some of the clothes that the Bantu are wearing, like headdress, jewelry, stuff like that. And there's loads of similarities. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? Really
yeah,
ancient. Like you look at the way a Bantu man was dressed in like 300 AD, a depiction, and it'll match up with something on the walls in Egypt.
yeah. I've seen it. I've seen there's the link with Uganda. There's the link with Congo linguistically. Ramses the Third as well. He was
Oh yeah, because
Bantu
Congo's
lineage.
Bantu, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. So Ramses the Third had the DNA of Bantu. Now that's only around 1200 BC, but
BC. Yeah.
there's other because a lot of the Egyptians and the North Africans, like the Black Mummy in Libya, they all had sub-Saharan African DNA. So that's why I can kind of believe that, like maybe it in Ethiopia. I mean, they say Lucy's from Ethiopia, But there's many different findings around that Central Africa, Great Lakes, Kenya, Tanzania, so.
And there was a really old fossil as well that you were speaking about with Tau that's being found in Central Africa. That made me think twice, because I always believed in the Ethiopia story, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But Chad's got old remains, man.
7 million years. Now, I think I look at these ones as like, when I see like dates like that, because it can look outlandish to what we're used to seeing, the common. But sometimes you do have to dig for things. And like I say, I don't really subscribe to the common ancestor with apes. I think we've always been human beings because, before this scientific DNA and that, there's some things in African oral history that matches up with science, and some things don't. Do you know what I mean? So if you look at the things that do match, that's even better. Do you know what I mean? Where
it's good when you get that confirmation in it. Both
you need common, because if you can get common grounds, that is like, where it's closer.
And you see a lot of that in the Mande peoples who West Africa part there. Their oral traditions are lining up with science like there's no tomorrow. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and you can see the African way in, because of the first people on the planet. Even just looking at the Native Americans, looking at the Pacific Islanders, a lot of East Asians, Southeast Asians, South Asians, West Asians, and then even the parts of Europe of just the African connection. It's just like Africans never stopped moving since the time they started migrating. Because when we look at a scientist, how he explains it is like, he explains about, people populated Africa and then left Africa 90,000 years. Some say 80,000, some even say 70,000. Some say even 50,000. So there's a massive difference between 50,000 years and 90,000 years. That's a big gap. But whatever, it's but anyway. So if you left 90,000 years ago, now if you explain another wave comes up, because one comes from the coast of where Yemen is, where you cross the Red Sea, and they take a coastal migration all the way right to New Guinea and Australia, and some kept on going up to right up Asia into America. And then some of them within India, some of them they're all in different places, so so at the end of the day, it's people need to invest more time into the Bantu.
We'll leave it there for now, and hopefully do a part 2 soon. Just got some more questions to get into, but thanks for coming on, and we'll see you again soon, James. Thanks very much.
Blessings anyway. Peace, Scott.